Hey, how's it going? My name is Emerson. I wanted to talk to you today about a certain type of meditation, particularly one pertaining to clearing blockages in the energy body. Now, this may be something you're more or less familiar with. I'm going to be producing a material and adding it to the playlist so that you can go through that and kind of get warmed more up to that as at your own pace. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to dive right in because it's a complicated enough topic without explaining all the lead up information to help understand this. So, the idea for this video is that, you know, in our we don't just have like a physical body. We also have they're like different dimensions, if you will, to our being, right? You also have what's called the emotional body, and these are terms you hear floating around from different new agey type movements. I'm sure it probably has some sort of that term emotional body probably comes from like yoga or something like that. And that's now I'm not taking anything from that. I'm just saying I didn't particularly study that. I heard about these terms, but I heard about these terms after I'd already kind of had some degree of experience with it. You know, um, so for me, uh, what kind of sparked the the exploration of it was that I had discovered at some point that, say for example, if you're trying to work through anxiety, one of the most powerful things you can actually do is to try to call its bluff, try to make yourself feel more anxious. And not only does that provide like some sort of like thought process of empowerment, but it actually causes a physiological chain of reactions in your body chemistry that makes it so that panic attack cannot continue. It might bubble up for a second, but then it short circuits itself. It has to. Your body is hardwired to do that. So when I found out about that, I started really kind of exploring it more. So this is my experience. So I remember at one point I was kind of in a tough place in life. I was trying to figure out some different things, and you know, I was really trying to figure out where I stood on some things. I guess you could say I was trying to find myself, and but I was also kind of it just something just didn't seem right. So I started applying that knowledge about like saying short circuiting anxiety, for example, right? And I started really kind of meditating deeply on it. And, I'll try to walk you through my experience so that maybe you can try to replicate it and maybe hopefully you might get something out of it as well. Um, so basically, I did was I remember I was sitting up in, uh, in a room I was in. Incidentally, at the time, I was kind of struggling a little bit, and I was sharing a room with some other people. And I remember everybody else in there was asleep, but I was sitting up, and the room was dark, and I was sitting there. So I started to meditate. So I just kind of got in a normal sitting position, and what I started to do is I started to think about how I got these different emotional sensations in my body, right? And that's an important idea to understand is that every time you have an emotion, be it anger or fear, or, happiness, there's a corresponding physical sensation somewhere in your body, and it's different for each emotion, right? For anger, you might feel something between your eyes, or wherever it is, whatever it is for you, it might be different for you. It's not always even the same for everybody, but so I started really exploring where these physical sensations were in my body, right? And so I sat there meditating, and I noticed like, okay, I'm feeling this feeling, right here somewhere, or maybe it's a little off to the side, whatever. And but once I located the feeling that I was trying to work on, I like I use my imagination to kind of produce this model of this feeling in my body. It's like, okay, I feel this emotional, physical sensation in my gut, a little to the right, and it's got this shape that's kind of spherical, but it's not perfectly spherical. Kind of comes in at this angle. Like I'm not writing out like a blueprint and using like geometric formulas, but in my mind I'm just visualizing the shape of the area of sensation, right? So I'm visualizing it, and I've noticed that within that locus, that model of this physical sensation I'm feeling that goes with this feeling, the emotion, it gets more intense at the center of it. So I was like, well, I know with the anxiety thing, you can short circuit it by trying to make it stronger. So let me try something. So what I did was like, think of it like this: if you were to try to repeat this, here's what you would do. You would kind of reconstruct, like you know how we reconstructed the area of the pain in our mind so we can imagine what it looks like, how big it is, the shape it is, and everything. Now you're going to kind of reconstruct, kind of imagine like a mini avatar for yourself, right? Like this isn't it's just an imaginary tool, right? But imagine you had like a tiny version of yourself that could move freely through your body, right? Like this mini imaginary avatar is like a tool to help you do, spiritual work at the level of your emotional body, right? So at the same time I'm seeing my whole physical body complete with the locus of emotional disturbance, right here off to the side or wherever it was. But then I also got this mini imaginary spiritual avatar that can just travel through everything like it's not even there, right? So I'm really focusing intently on this, and I'm seeing the locus of the emotional disturbance in my body, right? It's in the emotional body, but the emotional body is directly overlaid perfectly with the physical body. So I'm seeing, excuse me, that this locus of pain is like right there, wherever it was. Let's say it's right there, off to the side. And and I took my imaginary avatar, and it was like instead of my mind being behind my eyes or inside my thoughts, it went into the little imaginary avatar of me, and I piloted the avatar, if you will. Like imagine like your avatar can fly like Superman, right? Like he flew down my body directly toward the place of emotional disturbance. This is the counterintuitive part, right? Just like if you're having a panic attack, the most counterintuitive thing to do is to say, I want to make this an even stronger panic attack. But that's exactly the thing that will make your body physiologically turn it off, regardless of where your thoughts are. And your thoughts will improve about it later on because, you know, if you check out a program by Joe Barry called Panic Away, he explains that panic attacks are actually what what it really is that you're afraid of the experience of anxiety. It's a fear more so than other things, the phobias that you think you're really afraid of. You might be afraid of those too, but it becomes a panic attack when you're also anticipating and afraid of the anxiety and the panic. Anyway, that's a side trip. So again, going back to the locus of the emotional disturbance in my body during this meditation, I'm using that same logic from the panic attack. I said I'm going to move into the painful emotional disturbance, and I've given all this attention. I recognize where it corresponds to in my body, and I've got my little mental avatar, and I'm flying into it, and as I'm flying toward it, I have I notice, not that I'm trying to imagine this. This isn't part of the meditation to look for this, but I noticed that the closer I got to it, I noticed that there was a lot of resistance, and that resistance was pain. It's some sort of pain, like fear or anger. It's emotional disturbance. It's pain, and so as I'm flying closer to it, it's like my avatar is like got like this almost like a wind, but it's like it's like an emotional wind, right? Pushing against him, like I'm trying to fly into like Superman's face first, and you got this emotional wind flying against you because that and again, I'm not looking for that wind. That's not what I'm trying to imagine, but because I can feel it. I'm not just imagining it. It's not like my avatar is going through it. It's like, no, as my avatar flies through it, this is the crazy part. This is the part where I think I might lose a lot of people. As my avatar was flying towards the locus of emotional pain, I was physically feeling that emotional wind on top of my whole regular physical body. Here's the crazy thing: when you're doing this sort of work on the emotional body and you move into the pain with that little avatar, you feel it over your whole body as if your whole body was actually your avatar, right? Don't ask me to explain it. I haven't read that much. This is just some stuff that I stumbled into doing just right and it worked out for me. So, anyways, to continue, I flew into the pain, flew into the emotional wind, right? Flying into the locus of the emotional disturbance. And I'm encountering all this resistance, all this emotional resistance, right? This emotional wind. And it gets harder and it takes more and more willpower to push through it. And then I get all the way to the thing, like the locust. I remember we said it's shaped like, let's just say it's shaped like a football, to give it a shape. I'm flying into the football, right? And but I'm still getting closer and closer. And then there comes to the point where, like, the face of my little, avatar, emotional body Superman, his face starts to touch his skin, right? And now it's not only that you got this emotional win, but it's like there's like a skin in the football. Like, it's like there's like a some kind of like skin, like some sort of like barrier, right? But it's not like a barrier you can't overcome, right? But it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of focus. And so the spiritual avatar gets to that locus of pain, and that's the point where a decision is made. Do am I have I had enough of all this weirdness and wondering if I'm crazy, and furthermore stressing myself out by welcoming all this pain to me? Have I had enough, or am I going to see it through? So I chose to see it through. And so by seeing through, what that meant was that now that I've pushed through all that emotional wind, I've made it to the skin of the football of the emotional disturbance in my body that's actually from the emotional body. Once I made it to the skin of that football, I didn't stop. I pushed through. I pushed my little spiritual avatar, pushed his whole head through. And mind you, the way that I'm talking about a certain way because it's like I'm imagining this little man, but at the same time I'm wholly invested in this little man as I'm doing it, and I'm even more wholly invested because everything he experiences, I'm feeling it over my whole actual physical body. All this I'm feeling it, right? Pushed through the skin of that football. Now I'm inside the football, and for all that emotional wind that I experienced leading up to breaking through that skin, it is it's even stronger inside the football. Once you're inside the football, now this is the part where you're actually facing your inner demons, right? And, I don't know. Maybe some of you might actually see a demon. I don't know, but I don't. That's not so much what I'm suggesting you'll see. What I'm saying is that you break inside that football, right? And now it's not that you have an emotional win, right? Like, let's say that emotional win was like nuclear win, right? You're not in the middle of nuclear win anymore. Now you're in a nuclear reactor. You're not just getting nuclear win. You're in the nuclear reactor. So all that emotion is like powerful right there. Inside there is powerful. And then that's when you realize just how much you've been messing yourself up by essentially you've been creating this. If you understand and accept the fact that you created this in some manner with your thoughts, or by your lack of self accountability for your thoughts, your lack of self development, we should say, but ultimately self accountability for your thoughts, then you realize, like, man, I really have to change something because I've created this nuclear reactor, and this is a little part of my body, right? And this part of my emotional body, and it's affecting my physical body and my physical health, right? And so, anyway, you're inside the emotional reactor. There's no more emotional when you're inside the emotional reactor. this is the beautiful part. Much like with the panic attack, right? With the panic attack, if you ask for more, it short circuits. Similarly, if you stick around and stay inside the emotional reactor long enough, it will dissipate. And the whole emotional football will disappear. If you come into what, a healthy enough approach, you might alchemize and you might get an energy boost. I've actually experienced like raising the kundalini a couple times because I did this work. Because I went from one emotional reactor football to another emotional reactor football to another one, another one, another one. I had a lot at one point until all the blockages in my emotional body were clear. And when all of them are clear, the kundalini rose for me a few times. This has happened more than once. I'm not saying that like I'm some guru. Don't think that, because again, I stumbled into most of this, right? I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just studying myself, and I, you know, So all these things happen for me, and you know, the beautiful thing is that once you clear that emotional blockage, and if you do like I did, you can, like that night when I did this, I'm speaking of, I kept going from one location to another location to another location to another location, and then you clear all your emotional blockages. You get to that point where I think for a moment I would be what I would call, what a lot of people call enlightened, and it's not that you're all knowing about all these things outside of yourself. It's that now you're all knowing about all the things you were doing to yourself. You understand. You understand. Like, I don't know if I should say it like that, but it's like you understand where the source of your problems were. And you've cleared them, right? So that's the the general gist of the meditation, right? You have your little spiritual avatar, mental, man, your little avatar, Superman flying around character that flies into the locuses of emotional disturbances in your body, whether it's shaped like a football or a cube or Barney the dinosaur. I don't care what they look like. Whatever they're shaped like, whatever the pain feels like in your body. If they ever, you shouldn't say like, oh, I want it to be shaped like, Patrick Star because I like Patrick Star. No, 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 no. It needs to be shaped like whatever that emotional disturbance physically feels like in your physical body. Your physical body is your roadmap to your emotional body. Let me repeat that. Your physical body is your roadmap to your emotional body. So when you find where the emotional disturbance is causing a physical sensation in your body, and you map out in your mind what it looks like how, where the limits of this physical sensation corresponding to this emotion, and you map it out. And then you can take your little avatar man, you can fly him down in there against the emotional wind into the emotional reactor. You can weather the emotional reactor for usually a few seconds, but it could be a couple minutes maybe, but you sit in it. You have to sit in the pain. And that's when alchemy happens. When you sit in the pain, that's when alchemy happens, right? So, physical body, roadmap to the emotional body. Find the pain. Figure out what shape the pain is in and where it feels the strongest. Create an emotion, not create a little imaginary avatar of yourself, and meditate. Right, you're by meditating. Like in my mind, when I did this, I wasn't even thinking I'm meditating. I was just thinking like I'm focusing. Focus on flying this guy into wherever you found the emotional disturbance. Fly him against the emotional wind into the emotional reactor, where the emotional reactor is just a physical sensation corresponding to the emotional disturbance, right? So fly them into the emotional reactor. Don't get deterred by the emotional wind. And when you get into the emotional reactor, don't get deterred by how intense the pain is. You got to stay in there. You got to be present. And if you could do that, not only will not only will you have the opportunity to clear that sensation from your body altogether, but you'll also have the opportunity. This is the second thing. You can clear it all together. You'll also have the opportunity to turn it into positive energy. You can turn all that negative energy, all that immense negative energy, it can become positive, immense positive energy. And then thirdly, here's perhaps the most powerful part. And this is the part I haven't spoken about just yet because it takes a little explanation just to get to this point. But if you get to the point where you're inside the emotional reactor, you're just waiting for things to change, right? Because you just have to sit in there and it'll change eventually. But if you really want to empower yourself even further, you have to understand that, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to stress it again. You created the emotional reactor with your thoughts. Excuse me. Even if, say, something, God forbid, somebody victimized you, it was your victim thinking afterwards that allowed this thing to materialize, because there are people who have all kinds of bad things happen to them and they just handle it well. And I'm not saying again, I'm not a therapist. Ask your therapist, and don't, just trust me and not listen to somebody else, who's a professional. I'm not a professional, but I'm just talking about things that work for me. But I'm saying is that the way that you think about things that happen in your life are the biggest difference between whether or not you create these emotional disturbances or whether you're able to just alchemize it quickly and move on. So again, given that this thing was created from your thoughts, this means that the third benefit is that when you're inside the emotional reactor, the most powerful and also sometimes the scariest opportunity that you have available to you, if you have the presence of mind and willpower, is that when you're in that emotional reactor, you can pose a question inside the emotional reactor right to the heart of your pain. You can talk to your pain because it's you. It's just a part of your mind. You can ask it, what is the problem? What is the thought that generates all this? What is the thought that is generating this? And if you're sincere, and if you're willing to weather whatever pain it takes to really understand, you'll give yourself your answer. And when you hear that thought come back to you in words that you can recognize as a thought, as opposed to just emotion, right? Because emotion, all your emotions start with a thought. When you hear the thought that generate all that emotion, you'll be able to logically debate it, right? Usually, thoughts become emotional blockages because they're just sitting in the back of our mind and we're not intellectually engaging with it. They become like a harmful belief or something to that effect that we're not really directly confronting. This is why most of the time counselors just want you to talk, right? They want you to just talk out the thought, and that's great. A lot of times that's really all you need. But this is another strategy that I found works for me, and I also feel that it opens a lot of opportunities for spiritual development as well. So one more time to summarize, if you want to hear it again, I'll try to make it as simple as possible. You start with your physical body being your roadmap to your emotional body, right? So if you decide you feel like there's an emotional blockage about something in your life, you need to think about that feeling and then think about where you physically feel the sensation of that emotion in your physical body. Once you have figured out where it is in your physical body, whether it's here, 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 you need to figure out where it is. Let's say it's here. You figured out that it's here, and then you want to use your imagination, not to imagine what it looks like, but to construct in your mind in a 3D image of what what it looks like, like you you want to construct a 3D map of it basically. You're not just creating an arbitrary image for it that's creative. You're creating a 3D map for what it really feels like inside your body. And then once you have that 3D map, you're going to treat that as like it's an emotional disturbance in your body. And it's an emotional disturbance that's full of emotional energy. It's like a nuclear reactor, and it's generating a lot of problems for you. So then once you figure it out where it is and what it looks like and maybe where inside of it the energy seems to be strongest, you're going to construct an imaginary little avatar. A little avatar man or woman, whatever you are, whatever you identify with. Your little avatar of yourself, right? And you're going to fly him or her or whatever it is into that emotional reactor that you just mapped out. And then you on the way, you're going to come against resistance. That's essentially pain, but you could think of it as I like to call it emotional wind. And when you get to the emotional disturbance, you're going to have to break through the skin of it into the emotional reactor. Once you're inside the emotional reactor, you just have to sit in it, and eventually it will naturally alchemize and the disturbance will disappear. But you also have an opportunity before it disappears to ask what exactly the thought is that's driving and creating this whole process. And you should get your answer. And when you do, that's when things should turn around and the blockages should start clearing up. If you keep clearing up blockages, you just might, for example, raise the Kundalini or have other experiences. I've had experiences that I, just stumbled into, but then later on read about in religious texts that were actually very high level experiences, and oftentimes this sort of meditation was the catalyst. So just wanted to share that, and hope that's useful for somebody. Thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe.